All right, guys, welcome back to the very first episode of Barbershop Talk. A lot of news to get into, but today we're probably going to be focusing on the NFL free agency. A lot of big moves have happened recently, from Kirk Cousins, what's going to happen with Justin Fields, what's going to happen with the Chicago Bears in the draft, biggest contract in, defensive tackle history with the historic signing of Chris Jones and the Chiefs. Let's get into it.
There's a sea of podcasts out there, and they keep getting more scripted and more rehearsed. Well, trust me, my friends, that'll never be the case here. This is Barbershop Talk. Honest, real, raw, unfiltered, and straight from the heart. We speak our minds, and if that's a problem, we won't apologize. With Phil's background in sports stats and his addiction to pop culture, along with Jem's extensive sports knowledge, they're the perfect duo. Yeah, you'll hear them hurling some insults, probably debating about the dumbest details, but it's about the fun, baby. So whether you're into sports, politics, entertainment, or just want to eavesdrop on some craziness, you're in the right place. Find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Barbershop Talk News, on YouTube at Barbershop Talk, and for the latest podcast highlights, hit up Barbershop Talk Clips. Welcome to Barbershop Talk, and now your hosts, Philip and Jim.
All right, first on the block would be the Chris Jones signing. He signed for approximately $160 million over 5 years, $95 million guaranteed, making it the largest contract any team has ever offered a defensive tackle in the history of the NFL. This comes as a surprise to many people. It was expected for the Chiefs to tag Jones and sign Ladarius Sneed, but in the surprise move, they signed Chris Jones to that historic contract. What do you think about this?
I think they overpaid. I think the Chiefs were in a good spot in their defense. This goes counter to everything that I'm hearing on the news, but I think the Chiefs would have been much better off keeping about 5 or 6 of their core people together than keeping Chris Jones. I think they're going to go the way of the Rams when they signed Aaron Donald to the big contract. They've been pretty mediocre plus ever since, and I don't know how you keep that defense together, paying him all that money. They've already lost Willie Gay, who was very, very good, and they're probably going to lose Snead. That's 2 big pieces to that defense already. They've got a lot of offensive linemen that are going to be coming up for big contracts in next year and the year after, so I don't know how they keep it all together and pay Chris Jones. If guys want to be there in Kansas City and play for a winner, they should be willing to take a little bit of a discount. And if they don't, let them tag them, get 2 first-round picks for them, and move on.
No, exactly, especially when you talk about losing a lot of the offensive line. Nick Allegretti, we've already lost to Washington. He signed 3 years, $16 million. Willie Gay, 1 year, $5 million on the Saints. That's kind of surprising, you would think. If we could take him for 1 year, $5 million, why not? And as far as picking between tagging Chris Jones and Snead, you would think tagging Jones and trading him for first-round picks is kind of like the more appropriate pivot. So our defensive line is already pretty good. And you look at this year's NFL Combine, it's defensive tackle after defensive tackle running like 4.7, 4.6s. I'm not saying it's Chris Jones is directly replaceable, but I think our defensive line has the ability to still be incredibly good without him. It's kind of like pivoting off Tyreek Hill, crazy in the moment, but at the end of the day, we converted Tyreek Hill into Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie, kind of becoming one of like a top 5 2-man game in the NFL as far as cornerbacks go. And if you want to talk about not spending too much money, if we did overpay Ladarius Sneed, the highest paid position in the NFL is a QB. The furthest position from the quarterback is probably a cornerback. There's a direct relation as far as how much you pay the further you get away from a quarterback.
I think they probably could have locked them up. I think you wanted to stay in Kansas City. I think they probably could have locked them up, giving them like a 5-year, $75 million.
The amount you're going to pay him per year is a lot lower than Chris Jones.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. And all I'm trying to get across is you're paying him about $12 million a year. You're probably paying him like $15 million a year, however long it's going to be. And it's a lot harder in today's NFL to pivot off a cornerback. Like, as everyone says, it's a very top-heavy position all across the league. There's maybe 4 or 5 guys that are actually elite, and everyone else is just, pretty average, and there's not any help coming in the combine for years to come. If you pivot off Chris Jones, like I said, the combine is filled with promising defensive tackles, and tag him non-exclusively. You get rid of him and bring in 2 first-round picks on top of saving all of that money, on top of keeping together that core of the defense that everyone talks about. Because the defense is not only Chris Jones. A lot of, if you casually watch the Chiefs, all you think about is Chris Jones being the heart of the defense. But you look at Spags and the way he speaks about it, it's all about guys like Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton goes down, Trank Hill comes in, high IQ players that can all replace each other and that all have the same values and the same core to continue getting the defense going. So losing one guy, Chris Jones, who's clearly a leader. There's other leaders that are there to step up. It's all a salary cap move to me.
I think Allegretti or whatever his name is, Allegretti, the guy that went to Washington, $7 million a year. He's a backup, but I mean, he stepped in the playoffs. He started the Super Bowl, and they did pretty well in the Super Bowl. So that is going to hurt. Snead, that's going to really hurt. And they're talking about getting like a second and a third round, or a second or third round pick for him, or 2 or 3 mid-late round picks for him. Whereas Jones would have brought in 2 first-round picks. And I don't think you can replace Snead with. I mean, you'd get real lucky if you found somebody in the second or third round to replace him. And I didn't think they did that bad in the first game against Detroit. I mean, what they lose to them, 21-20, and they pretty much should have won the game. It wasn't the defense. You know what I mean? They were able to handle Detroit's vaunted offense without him. So I think they should have kept I think it's important for them to keep it all together. If you want to know what they are with Chris Jones and with below average defense, look at the last 3 or 4 years. Their defense has been average to below average, and I think they're going to go back to that next year, paying him $30 million.
Chiefs fans, remember, it's not too long ago we had to rely on Mahomes putting up 40 in order to win games. That's what it was. We've had Chris Jones since 2016. While he's been on that defense, we've had to rely on Mahomes to put up double-digit numbers and guide the offense to win every game. It's only been this year that we've had a top defense in the league that has been able to save Mahomes when the offense has totally struggled.
Willie Gang is an absolute freak on defense too. Mm-hmm. I mean, he gets injured a lot, but I mean, he's done some things as a linebacker. He number one, he can cover wide receivers. He can blitz. He can take on. He's an absolute freak. That's going to hurt, and they could have kept him for $5 million. Football, it's not a get the best player and pay him whatever he asks for type of thing. There's got to be strategy involved, and I get the feeling that 90% of sports teams don't understand what a puzzle it is to piece together a team and keep it all together.
If you got a guy like T.J. Watt, give him that type of money. If you got a guy like Hutchinson, give him that type of money. If you look at his stats over the course of the past 5 years, he's probably like 9th in sacks.
Yeah.
And the credit everyone's giving Chris Jones is when the moments are totally big. There's 2 minutes left in the game, 2 minutes left in half. If the game's on the line, you can always rely on him to make the big plays. We're not saying this in any type of disrespectful way. We're talking about strategy and pivoting off your best players to save money. If you get rid of Chris Jones, you can still pivot off and have a great defensive line without him. When you get rid of Snead, there are no cornerbacks in the league that are not of his caliber. There's maybe like 4 or 5. So he would have been the smart one to tag. He would have been the smart one, or he would have been the smart one to pay, and Chris Jones would have been the smart one to kind of pivot off of, because you could still kind of build that defensive line to consider it very good. Maybe not necessarily what it was, but that's a good pivot.
We've had 5 years of the defensive back. The Chiefs have had 5 years of the defensive backs just getting torched, and we finally have a couple of quarterbacks that are arguably, top 3 in the league. And don't get me wrong about Chris Jones. He's my absolute favorite player on the Chiefs. I mean, and he's an absolute stud. He puts up the stats. He comes up big. I mean, he's my absolute favorite player on the defense on the Chiefs and has been for the last 5 years. But you can't pay him.
Historic player.
Yeah.
He's made that everyone points to most recently. He's the one that forced the field goal in the Super Bowl, that forced it to overtime, it resulted in the chip. We get all that. But if you start paying guys like him historic money, you develop the same type of culture as the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you start paying your defense a ton of money, you're not going to be able to afford those offensive weapons. And with a quarterback like Mahomes, with the way the NFL has gone, where it's just totally aired out and every single quarterback gets however many throws a game, you can't get stuck paying your defense that. You can't totally focus all of your money on defense, in my opinion.
That's true. Steelers, same thing. Same the Aaron Donald thing. They paid him, and they haven't been able to get out of the first round of the playoffs ever since.
And
by the way, Snead had an even bigger player. They keep talking about Jones with the big play. The absolute biggest play was Snead poking the ball out of the guy on the.
What was it? 2 inches away from a touchdown. That's what I'm saying.
Bigger than that.
He's the discount, in my opinion. Paying him historic money would be a discount, but we wouldn't be having the same discussion where it's like, if you pay a quarterback historic money, you can still afford offensive players because they really don't get paid that much. Chris Jones everyone always likes to say, good for him, man. He got paid, but you're taking away a lot of money from a lot of players.
Guys that are making $1 million a year.
No, exactly.
Give them too. But Willie Gay is an absolute stud. And $5 million a year?
That's what I'm saying. But you got to make decisions.
1 year, $5 million.
And I get it. If we're sitting here saying, $5 million this year, but that's what we're trying to say. When you pay someone like Jones that much money, you start letting guys like that go for $5 million a year.
You can't.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. They got rid of Tyreek Hill, and I remember saying what a few draft picks, and not really that. And didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But we converted them into Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie and survived. I think this would have been the same situation where it's, if you looked at maybe even like the Patriots for the past 15 years, including the Tom Brady era more so, where they would pivot off these guys like Wes Welker, and you would sit there and question it, and you would go, well, where do they go from here? Why are they getting rid of all these players? They kept Tom Brady and Gronk and maybe a few other players, and the dynasty kept going. They were able to pivot off these great players. 2 Super Bowls after we got rid of Tyreek Hill. Not expected, but it happened. I think this situation should have been the same thing, where it's like everyone loves Chris Jones. Every Chiefs fan loves Chris Jones. We all would have thought it was crazy to get rid of him, but I think that's the decision to make, to pivot off him, not get rid of someone like Snead, who, like we already just said, there's a cornerback shortage in the NFL. We can't rely on the guys we already have when we already have someone like him.
So we got to talk about other people besides the Chiefs, I guess.
Yeah, we do. I like this move. It's kind of like 50-50 right now in the sports world. Russell Wilson to the Steelers. I think.
Joke, yeah.
So, to provide a little bit of context for the viewers, Broncos had Russell Wilson on a giant contract where I think the remaining amount of money on the contract was probably like $50 million, and they ended up cutting him. They're still responsible to pay him. So wherever Russell Wilson decides to sign, he can sign for a veteran's minimum, but that still means he's getting paid $50 million from the Broncos. So the question became, when he got cut by the Broncos, who would you rather, your team's quarterback or Russell Wilson on a veteran's minimum? Because he's still getting paid from the Broncos.
He's made Pittsburgh San Francisco now. Pittsburgh now has a front line for $1 million, and they've got the rest of their brand new extra $30 million, $28 million cap space to go out and fill the team out around the guy who's capable of winning a Super Bowl.
But so you're getting Russell Wilson, an elite quarterback, at the veterans minimum, but it's because Russell Wilson isn't taking a pay cut. He's still getting paid by the Broncos. Sports world is kind of split because, half the people think he's washed. Half the people don't think he has it anymore. And a lot of people are stuck onto that culture issue he had at the Broncos. But to me, I think the main issue lied in they brought Russell Wilson in from Seattle to build the culture in Denver. When you think about the culture built on the Seahawks, Russell Wilson wasn't necessarily responsible for it. You had guys like Marshawn Lynch, and during the prime years, they were labeled the Legion of Boom because of their defense. Russell Wilson's passion for the game was undeniable, and that's why he was such a great quarterback for them. But the culture wasn't necessarily reliant on him. When you brought him in to build the culture, that's when a lot of these issues really started surfacing. where people were calling him a prima donna. He needed his own parking space, his own office, his everything else. And so if you're trying to build the culture with that kind of guy, that's why I don't think it was going to work. If you go to somewhere like the Steelers, guy like Mike Tomlin, he's never been below 500 for his entire career. He's always had a winning record. Their culture is already defense. They brought in the coach from Atlanta, who's a very like early 2000s, late 2000s type of offensive coach. Run it down your throat. Got a running back that's totally violent. Guys like T.J. Watt are already there. The culture there is already established, and you're bringing in a guy like Russell Wilson who still has that passion for the game, who doesn't necessarily need to build the culture in Pittsburgh. It's already a historic franchise. He'll be able to come in and hopefully do what he used to be able to do. And, yeah, what do you think?
Well, the one thing about Russell Wilson is, though, I'll take exception to that. I think he's an absolute gamer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe he did get a little full himself. But at his core, I think he's an absolute gamer. I'm one of the guys that happened to follow him in college, North Carolina, Wisconsin. Where did he go? Wisconsin? Wisconsin? Yeah. First he was at North Carolina, and then he transferred there. In both places, he took, not that great schools pretty far. And then he started to do the same thing in the pros, and he did absolutely. He was a gamer. I mean, he was a come-from-behind winner type of thing. So I think he'll mesh well with, if he goes back to the old Russell, if there is such a thing, with Tomlin and the cap space. It's all about cap space now. If you can get Russell Wilson for $1 million a year, I don't know how Tomlin talked him into that. I mean, yes, he got his money from Denver, but he still could have gotten 20 from him, and then he would have made it 70 million, or So hats off to him. He's taken a little bit of money to go out and show what he can do. He's probably going to hope to get 30, 40 million next year if he does something with the Steelers. But how can you not do something with the Steelers? They've been winning with no quarterback for the last 3 years.
That his passion for the game is undeniable, and that's why he's taking something like a vet minimum just to keep it, just to make it work for the Steelers, just to prove something. That's the other thing I need to kind of dispel is he didn't have that bad of a season last year.
You can't look at him and say he was the problem in Denver.
But what I mean to say is the argument a lot of people are saying is he's washed. He can't do it anymore. And if anything, you can say he's getting older and still trying to make one read, and he just gets out of the pocket right away, and maybe his reaction times aren't there. That's the main argument I'm hearing. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are just saying he's just straight up washed. He can't do it anymore. But when you look at last year, his completion percentage was the third highest in his entire career, 66%. He still threw for 3,100 yards. And to compare that to his prime year, his completion percentage was 68% in 2015, and in 2020 he threw for 4,000 plus yards, but that was like prime time Seahawks. But what I mean to say is his numbers really haven't fallen off.
12 games, right? Or 10 games? How many games did he even play?
Yeah, exactly. So this season, his numbers really haven't fallen off. And Jerry Jeudy, call him like the pretty pick privilege, where now he's still getting paid on the Browns. A lot of people are still want him, but he just has not panned out the way the Broncos thought he would. He really pretty much only had Sutton. I think he was maybe fourth most touchdowns in the league last year. He had a pretty good season, but Russell Wilson, I don't think is washed. A lot of his stats still line up with his prime. He hasn't fallen off that much. I think in the right situation, like I said, Steelers, their offensive line isn't terrible. It's just kind of there. They got a really promising wide receiver, and their running back is also great. And their defense, we know about the Steelers' defense. That's their entire culture. Mike Tomlin's a defensive coach, and they just hired Arthur Smith, who, if you want to make the argument for the Falcons last year, when Arthur Smith was the head coach, he was maybe a quarterback away from doing something with the Falcons. You know what I mean? And now his prayers have been answered. He has a guy like Russell Wilson. He has a great offense he can run in Pittsburgh. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, but what I'll say about Russell Wilson is if you look at Tomlin, his best years were with Roethlisberger. Mm-hmm. And Roethlisberger, everyone tries to compare Mahomes to this, that, the other thing. The one you can compare him to is Roethlisberger, in that he's got the decent arm. He runs around in the pocket. He's deceptively escapes. And then the next thing you know, he's running up the field for 30 yards, not that fast looking.
Wait, were you comparing Roethlisberger right now?
Roethlisberger to Mahomes.
Okay.
Now, is there another quarterback out there that's kind of like those guys? Russell Wilson.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, he can move, escape the pocket. He can fling it downfield. He can extend plays. And then, you know, every so often he can turn upfield for like 37 yards, and he can still do that. So, and guys like that, I mean, if you're a consistent quarterback, you either get, you know, eat up and spit out in your first year if you're a quarterback and you never recover. Sometimes after your second year, they figure you out and you never recover. But if you perform in the NFL for 10 years, you're a quarterback. And I think they've been a quarterback away. I think maybe Tomlin just needs a good freelancing type of Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger type of guy, and he'll get it back. But the Steelers, I don't know how they've managed to win the last few years. Throw Russell and Wilson into the conversation, that's a home run for them at $1 million a year. Wow.
So what do you think? Think it's going to work out or no? You're optimistic.
Well, I think the Steelers are going to be competitive again next year. I don't know whether they're going all the way. I'm not going to sit there and say like, oh, they're going to beat out the Ravens, who just signed Derrick Henry.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
It's like,
I would love to be super optimistic.
You know, Joe Burrow's going to be back next year. Okay, they're probably going to retain all their wide receivers. They you know, just dumped their tight end off on us and picked up a better one. So
I feel,
you know, I don't feel like they're going to. But who thought they were even going to make the playoffs? The fact that they made the playoffs this year means you just can't count them out. That's it.
I'm almost happy for Russell Wilson, but it's also you kind of feel bad for the Steelers a little bit. AFC North is probably the toughest division in football right now. So as much as we can hype up Russell Wilson and how he might be in a great situation, you still got to go against the Ravens, who just signed Derrick Henry, the biggest, baddest running back in the NFL. They still don't really have a wide receiver one, but you never know if Zay Flowers finally does develop into a reliable player. They still have Mark Andrews, and guess what? The MVP, Lamar Jackson, he's still on the team too. Bengals, like you said, Joe Burrow, they still have Chase.
Yeah.
They're going to maybe retain T. Higgins, but if not, they're going to convert him into something else. Yeah. Browns, Deshaun Watson, if he returns to any shell of his former self, all of a sudden that team, Deshaun Watson, all of a sudden that team still has Amari Cooper as a wide receiver one on a kind of a discount. They just signed Jerry Jeudy, who, like I was saying before, you ever heard of pretty pick privilege? They gave up a lot for him, even though he hasn't panned out, but he was still supposed to be very good. Yeah. So people are giving him a lot of credit and another chance, and he's supposed to perform very well with the Browns. And they just signed a new running back, Naheem Hines, who isn't bad as well. So if you're Russell Wilson, I'm happy for him because I think he'll finally be able to show that he's not washed, or dispel the accusations of it being over for him. But I really have no idea how well the Steelers actually do.
Well, they did it last year, and that division was as good as it gets.
The big signing of Kirk Cousins and the Kirk Cousins saga. Just for a little bit of context, last year Kirk Cousins was playing for the Minnesota Vikings, and he tore his Achilles midway through the season, maybe game 8. And, of course, went through the surgery, season ended, and his contract was up. So a lot of people were wondering, is, if the Minnesota going to, keep Kirk Cousins? Are they going to let him walk? Who knows? And at the end of the day, they let him walk. They entered a rebuild phase, and he signed with the Atlanta Falcons. So an argument a lot of Atlanta fans are having is, hey, we are a quarterback away. Our defense is stacked. We have top wide receivers on both ends, a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 2 with London and Pitts, and we have a top running back as well in Najee Robinson. So they really felt they were a quarterback away from, at the very least, being contenders. And with the addition of Kirk Cousins, a lot of them think like, hey, that's the piece. And if you look at their division, it's really weak. They pretty much only have to worry about Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
That's about it. So I think the only issue I see is Atlanta fans are kind of overrating their entire roster. Their defense last year was supposed to be much better than what it was. They poured a ton of money into it, and I feel like they got a little bit overrated. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of them are under the impression that their team's a quarterback away from greatness, but I think they're a quarterback away from making the playoffs. It's probably going to win the division if Kirk Cousins is even a little bit back to what he was.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I think Kirk Cousins gets them into the playoffs. Maybe they win the division. whoever comes out of that division like 9-8 probably wins it again next year.
Oh yeah.
But Tampa Bay brought back Baker and the receiver. New Orleans is stacking up a little bit too.
A little bit. So you have to worry about like what Derek Carr and an aging receiver core, and then you kind of argue the Falcons could have won the division last year, even with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans.
And it's going to be the same thing next year, except they're all going to be a little bit better.
I'll say so. The reason I was initially kind of against the signing is obviously he's aging and coming off a Achilles tear. So we have no idea how he's going to actually be. But I felt like they were paying him a ton of money over the course of 4 years, and they're going to. What's he going to be, 39 or 40 by the end of it? But the more of the details came out of the contract, they are paying him a lot of money, but they have an out in 2 years, and their cap hit is going to be maybe like $10 million to get rid of him. So it really is kind of like a, hey, Kirk, come in. We're going to try it out for 2 years. You are going to get your money, and if we cut you, we cut you. And
yeah.
So we'll see. It makes a lot more sense to me now when you look at it that way. They're just kind of going all in for the next 2 years and really trying to, make it. And you can argue that Arthur Smith was the reason he got fired is they pretty much didn't have a quarterback last year. They went through 2 guys. We'll see what Raheem Morris can cook up.
Yeah.
I'm starting to kind of like the decision. But if you look at the broader picture of the NFC, are they better than Dallas now? Are they better than San Francisco?
No, they're going to be okay, though.
They'll be like 4. They're going to, that's what I mean. You're going to win the play.
So they might not even.
That's what I mean.
In that division, you've got to win the division.
The very least.
If you don't win the division, you're not making the playoffs because you're 8-9 if you don't win.
No, exactly.
Or less.
At the very least, I think Falcons fans are excited to make the playoffs, but they might just be second round exits for the next 2 years, and it is what it is.
It just shows you.
Because, by the way, I was going through the teams. I said Cowboys. I said 49ers. Still got to worry about the Lions. Still got to worry about the Packers. Philadelphia Eagles signed Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, they got Barkley, and they brought back Gardner Johnson.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, man.
And he badmouthed the fans then.
Yeah.
Wonder how that's going to work out.
Well, we'll see what happens, man. But I truly believe on paper they should be a great team. On paper they should be the best in the league. But when you read between the lines, they lost their offensive and defensive coordinator from last year. They lost Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox. I think combined experience might be 20 years in the franchise.
The culture over there.
That's what I mean. They're losing a ton of culture, a ton of leadership. If there was ever any crass and annoying questions from the media where they're trying to pry the play, Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox were the guys that kind of stepped up, were the guys that kind of held it in line. This is kind of reminding me of, what was it, maybe like 2011. Do you remember the Dream Team? Vince Young, when he declared Michael Vick, all those guys, the Dream Team of Philly, I think they ended up going maybe like 10-6 and didn't even make the playoff.
Yeah, I don't think Philly's going to do anything. But I also think Kelsey is a big lie. I mean, you'd watch the games and you'd see like Kelsey, the center, which I've never seen in 50 years of watching. Maybe it happens, and I just never noticed it. But you'd see Kelsey waving off the quarterback when he tried to check off.
Oh, I thought you just said liability.
No. I mean, what is it for a center to be able to
he's reading
tell the quarterback, no, don't change the play. That might cost him back. And I also think Kelsey had something to do with the tush push. I don't know if it's going to work as well without him. Maybe half of it is Kelsey and half of it is Jalen. But those offensive line get low. There's something they're doing that they learned from that rugby player that's on the offensive line now. Something they're doing that nobody else is doing.
No, exactly. But if you're going to point to this team and look at their roster and say they're the best in the league, great. Yeah, if there was anyone keeping that team together, it's the older guys, and they just lost the 2 biggest vets they have. That's a ton of culture that they're losing there. That's a ton of leadership they're losing. One of the best offensive linemen we've seen in a while, being able to look back and tell his quarterback and read the defense even better than his own quarterback and wave him off is crazy. And now you're kind of losing that culture in the locker room of the older guys. Like I said, 20-plus years of experience, and by the end of last season, they were kind of falling apart at the seams. You had A.J. Brown on the sidelines.
They fell apart at the...
You felt like there was like a mutiny against the coach. You had the wide receiver kind of yelling at Jalen Hurts. Yeah. So they're just losing. we'll see if the culture lines up. I do like the whole storyline of Saquon leaving the Giants to go to the Eagles. Like, well, I mean, you want to talk about like the story is kind of writing itself.
I mean, it'd be one thing. I don't understand why players do that. Okay, the Giants were basically paying him 13. He says he liked it there. Okay, and then they're saying no, we're not going to give you 20 because nobody's going to give you 20. And then he goes out there and he finds out that that is my market value, 13. And then he goes to Philadelphia for 13. Why not just go back with your hat and the thing and say, you know what, I like it here. They're giving me 13. If you guys will give me 13 for 2 years, I'll stay. You know, why not remember when Justin Houston did that to the Chiefs? It's like he wanted 20. He didn't get it. He goes out a free agent. And then he signs 2 years, $22 million. And you're like, well, why didn't you give that to the Chiefs? And they do that all the time. Like Willie Gay. I can't believe the Chiefs wouldn't have given Willie Gay $5 million.
There's got to be something there in terms of, like remember the owner grades came out and we upgraded like a D and an F on every single aspect of our organization.
F minus.
Exactly.
F minus. There is no such thing as an F minus. You know what I mean? And
right.
It's failure. Failure is failure. F minus, what is that? That's even worse.
No, right. So when you look at the example like Justin Houston, why did he leave?
The owner must really piss him off.
No, the owner, there's probably something beyond the team where you look at Saquon and go, dude, a division rival? I think there's more to it than...
there must be. Well, in Kansas City, there must be because the players leave for less money and they're winning. It's like they should be getting everybody at a discount. They won 3 of 5 Super Bowls. As long as Mahomes is in the building, they're going to be in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And they're losing players, you know.
Anyway, so just the last subject of the day. The Bears all of a sudden are getting a little bit of identity. They're starting to cook a little bit. That's the thing. So let's put it. Justin Fields' trade market's a little bit colder than they expected, but you assume he's going to get shipped off. They got the first round overall pick, second round overall pick. This class is you want one of their wide receivers or an offensive lineman. So with that second pick, they have that. They have DJ Moore, who's going to be a reliable wide receiver 1, and they just signed DeAndre Swift, a really, really reliable running back. So barring the quarterback, you can already see kind of like some type of offense getting formed there. You look at their defense, at least in their division, not rated that bad aside from maybe Hutchinson on the Lions, and the Vikings are pretty much blowing it up. They lost a lot of their star defenders. So if they draft Caleb Williams, if he turns out to be what everyone says he is, as far as a total ball player, he loves football, all he does is study the playbook, all he does is work hard, and he's a total gunslinger. You're looking at that division with the Lions. I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but I'm saying you look at their identity on offense. Eventually, the Lions are going to have to pay Jared Goff, so they're going to lose a few players on offense. And you imagine Jordan Field, I'm talking about in the future, he's going to want to get paid. So you're looking at a division where it turns into no defense, all guns blazing, and they're kind of setting themselves up to do that in the future. On top of which, I think their defense is eventually going to be rated the highest in that division. So they've kind of gone from absolute zeros last year to, oh, wow, wait a second, they might actually be able to turn around this NFL draft.
Yeah, but the Bears, for whatever reason, like, it must be some kind of curse. They're just...
Oh, I mean, it's
they're going to be an offensive team, like, no matter what they do and how hard they try. Like, everybody who looks at Justin Fields and says, wow, that guy is good, man. And he doesn't do anything in Chicago. Who knows? I mean, he had a 43 rating, so he might not end up being anything. But you look at him and you think, he could do something somewhere else. So what happens if they get Caleb Williams? They had Trubisky. I thought Trubisky looked pretty good, too, when he first came into the league. And they just seem to, ruin quarterbacks in Chicago. It's just, maybe it's just the cold. Maybe
they can't play in the cold.
Maybe they should get like an indoor practice facility. Do they practice outdoors there or something?
I don't know. I mean, no, you got to practice outdoors there, man.
Maybe they practice outdoors and everybody's just freezing and standing around like Coach when's practice over. And so they never run through the plays or something. And it's been like a 40-year problem that they haven't figured out.
If you look at Caleb Williams and assume he's going to pan out to be exactly what people think he will, even though that doesn't normally happen with quarterbacks, You strike gold or they're pretty average. You normally know by like 2.5 years in. But you got Caleb Williams. Now you have Swift as a running back, and you have two reliable wide receiver ones and twos. Or if you don't draft a wide receiver, maybe you do beef up the defense. We got a lot of defensive tackles running 4.6s and 4.7s in the combine right now. And like I was saying before, once Jared Goff wants to get paid, once Jordan Love wants to get paid, all of a sudden now you have the number one defense in the division with a great quarterback on a wide receiver and a running. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You start looking at their future. I'm not even a Bills fan, but I'm starting to think like, oh, hey, if you stick it out, maybe it's all right.
Well, they just traded away that receiver, though, didn't they? Or did they trade him away, or did they lose him in free agency?
They lost Darnell Mooney in free agency to the Falcons. So
the Falcons got him, too. I don't know. I just don't. The Falcons, I never commented on.
No, I think they're going to be very good. I mean, I think when you look at the Cowboys, they got to pay Dak and Dak, Micah Parsons, their defensive end, and CeeDee Lamb. So they're eventually going to die out, and they're not going to be able to pay a ton of players. If you look at the Falcons as a whole, now they're incredible. You overrate their defense. You assume their defense is overrated, but it still isn't bad. And now all of a sudden their offense is, we might be able to see what all these wide receivers and that running back could actually do with Kirk Cousins. They're a very well-balanced team. Well, let's find out with Rodgers, but the more you think about it with that Kirk Cousins signing, coming off the Achilles, he's 36, but it's a dangerous signing, but when has he ever relied on his mobility as a quarterback? He moves in the pocket and he can run if there's wide open space, but it's not like he's not Kirk Cousins if he can't run.
I know, but the Achilles for a quarterback is extremely important, even if you're
turn off the foot to throw.
But even if you're slow, I mean, even like Joe Flacco, he's got his eyes all around him, and you've got to be able to make a quick move here and you're running this way, and then you're cutting back and throwing off that foot. So I imagine the Achilles is pretty important.
I'm not saying it's not important. What I mean to say is, I think a guy like Kirk Cousins, I mean, it's not like you come back from surgery and can't move anymore.
Yeah.
If you're Aaron Rodgers is a lot more of a question mark as far as can you return. I just mean with Kirk Cousins.
Well, he's got a
he can. He does, but with your Kirk Cousins, it's can he still move in the pocket as opposed to can he still juke, spin, drop 3 defenders, and then run for 15 yards. That's not Kirk Cousins. I think we'll see. And the good thing, like I said, Kirk, I didn't like the deal when I thought it was 4 years and it was first reported. You look into it, after 2 years, they cut him. It only cost him $10 million.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to like the deal more and more.
If it works, it works. If it doesn't, but I think, in my opinion, I would consider that a success if they make the playoffs. And get bounced in the first round.
Well,
that's still a success. But I don't understand why would you go with Kirk? I mean, there's just enough.
Well, that's the point. What do they do without her?
He's a decent quarterback. But I give him credit, though. I mean, the guy must be, smart when it goes.
No, for sure. But
he always gets paid. He always is right place, right time.
But when you think with the Bears, not the Bears, what were the Falcons supposed to do? Is if they did, let's say, take the gamble on Justin Fields, he's on his last year of his rookie contract, and then what are you going to? If that fails, you got to pay him a ton of money, and you're still without a quarterback. With Kirk Cousins, it gives you a 2-year window of a reliable QB. A little bit of a question mark with the Achilles surgery, but you see the plan there. And I don't know what else they were. It was either Justin Fields or Kirk Cousins, and I think given the way the contract is structured, I am starting to agree with what they ended up going with.
What about you pick up Sam Darnold, giving him another throw?
Anyway, that's. You're accepting mediocrity if you sign Sam with Kirk Cousins.
Plus, he actually had a halfway decent season at one time.
But with Kirk Cousins, you've seen him play throughout his career, and he's brought his teams into number 1 seeds going into the playoffs.
I get it.
Deep in the playoffs, he's never won a Super Bowl. But you sign Kirk Cousins, you're not signing Sam Darnold. Right. The risk you're taking is, hey, if he is the answer, we can maybe become contenders. Sam Darnold, it's you might win the division, but that's it. There is no excitement behind Sam Darnold to me.
I just think Kirk Cousins, he must be a master negotiator because how did it come out? All we knew about Kirk Cousins, everybody saw him in the quarterback show. It's this guy is Mr. OCD. I like my house. I like my closet. I like my garage. I have my garage door opener right here. I go in. I do the same thing every time. So he played Atlanta like a fiddle. They were the only ones bidding for him. There wasn't anybody behind them saying, we need Kirk Cousins. It was either Minnesota, who was like, okay, dude, you blew out your Achilles. You're 36. You never were that mobile to begin with. Now you're going to go down to like Joe Flacco mobility. And we're not that good anymore. So, we'll give you 30 a year and we're doing you a favor. You know what I mean?
I guess so. Yeah.
No,
I think the Vikings,
but he played him.
They took it as an opportunity. Like, I think the injury was probably the best thing that ever happened to the Vikings as an organization, because in their heads, there was probably time to pivot off Kirk Cousins regardless. Yeah. And this way, they're not just like letting him walk. To them, it's, we can't pay this guy. He just came off an injury. It's time to move on. Let's blow up the team. And it doesn't look like they're sitting there screwing over Kirk Cousins. So I think, the injury is probably the best thing. I think they're moving on from Kirk regardless.
Yeah, I just think they really. I think they wanted to keep him, and it would have been good, because Jefferson likes him.
No, apparently he was very mad when he heard about the signing.
Yeah, he wanted him to stay and stuff, but I think it just, how do you had his Kirk Cousins with a blown out Achilles? I mean, he blew out his Achilles when, like November? You know what I mean? The season, he's got to report to training camp in like July.
That's what I'm trying to say.
6 months later. It takes 2 years to recover from an Achilles.
Not today. Not if you're an actual athlete. But on the other point from before.
Look at the basketball. For the basketball players.
Yeah, it's a little different.
They come back after a year, they're not that good. And then the following year, okay, they're back.
Okay, but this is the argument with Kirk Cousins when you said, why not just get Sam Darnold? What's the point? Before Kirk got injured, he was having a career year. In terms of completion percentage on the most attempts per game this year, it was 69.5% on 39 attempts. That's the best he's ever done in his career, and that was last year. Second most yards a game.
Last year or 2023?
This past season.
This past season before he got injured.
Right.
Okay.
I'm talking about in terms of the 8 games he played before he got injured. So before he got injured, he was on pace to have the highest completion percentage with the most amount of attempts in 39 and 69.5%. The second most yards per game in 291, and the third lowest interception percentage in his career. And he only played 8 games. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the Falcons, if you want to, just take a Sam Darnold, right? If the risk is it's Kirk Cousins, we know we're going to get what we're going to get with him. Mm-hmm. If we truly are a quarterback away, I can see the argument where let's just take the risk on Kirk Cousins for 2 years. Maybe we do something. I'm sure Kirk Cousins was saying the same thing. Hey, I was having an MVP year, one of the best in my careers. Achilles won't slow me down, and you guys are a quarterback away, so pay me.
Well, the thing is, it's organization. It's just they don't have skilled management and executive negotiating ability or anything in the NFL or any sports league for that matter. It's like, why did you put yourself in a position that you needed and wanted Kirk Cousins with a bad Achilles? He got played. Okay. The bottom line is the guy, he would have been lucky to get $30 million from the Minnesota to hang on for a couple of more years. And, so Atlanta, you've got to have other options. Fact is, Russell Wilson just signed for $1 million a year. Would they have been better off getting Russell Wilson for $1 million a year or giving him $2 million a year? You know what I mean? Like
I that's what I'm saying. I agree with what they did. He's coming off an MVP season aside from the injury. And if you truly think you're a quarterback away, you look at what Russell Wilson did last year. There was a lot of negative. As much as I wanted to beef him up, it's not like he had a typical Russell Wilson year. If you think you're a quarterback away, you go with the guy who is having an MVP season by his standards. Yeah. And if also in terms of the past few seasons, all the Falcons fans and maybe the Falcons organization felt like they were a quarterback away. Arthur Smith just got fired, arguably because he didn't have a quarterback. They've been through Desmond Ridder. They've been through
Desmond Ridder
and Marcus. What I mean to say is they just didn't have a quarterback. Yeah. And what was the other option? Baker was staying in Tampa no matter what, and he's the one that inflated this quarterback market. So they had to give Kirk Cousins that money. I think it's better that if it doesn't work out in 2 years, that's it. I like it.
Yeah.
I thought it was a win now decision, but you're locked up for 4 years. If you only got to do it for 2 years, you're
I want
fine.
to at least talk to Russell. I mean, if it probably knows you're probably going to save $10 million a year. Because his wife is sitting there going, "I want to go to Atlanta. I'm sick of this freezing cold." Okay, so he got him for an extra $10 million a year. Because if Minnesota was only offering 30, which is what I'm guessing that they were probably saying, like, "We'll keep you around, we like you, but we're not going to pay you $40 million because we don't even know if you're going to show up on the field until the end of November." Like, Kirk Cousins might not even be able to play until November.
He's ready by the start of next season.
Supposedly.
And but also,
with an Achilles.
what you're saying about Russell Wilson, that speaks to what I was saying before. I'm sure Russell met with the Falcons.
No, he didn't. He just went to Pittsburgh.
Well, the rumors were he was going to go to the Falcons, so I'm sure that was on his list of people to meet.
Well,
he showed up to Pittsburgh, spoke to Tomlin, spoke to Smith. The organization has a history of like 60-plus years of just winning and culture. On top of his undeniable passion for the game, he just chose Pittsburgh. You think he was going to sit there and go to Atlanta and go, brand new coach, team that's, lost historically for the past 3 years. Yeah, this is where I want to go to revitalize my career. Yeah, Atlanta. He walked into Pittsburgh, said, "Okay, I'm taking the minimum. I don't need $2 million from Atlanta or whatever you just said. I'll take the minimum to go in Pittsburgh, get to work with a culture that's already established, to do what I do, which is win games and play football."
Kirk Cousins is just a gunslinger, man. He's a hired gun. You know what I mean? Like,
And that's what Atlanta wants.
we need a quarterback to show up, and we just need to be competitive. We don't need to win Super Bowl. We need to get to the first round, man. And that's what he's going to do for him, maybe. Because Baker's coming back.
Baker's coming back with a vengeance.
If I were him, I would have done exactly that. I would have. I mean, how much money do you need?
But it's not even about him.
At 30, I would have taken 20 and give me a 5-year, $20 million a year deal and give me good wide receivers, and I'll be your quarterback for the next 5 years. Thick or thin, we'll get it to the playoffs every year. Maybe we'll get into the second round. Maybe we'll get lucky and get a Super Bowl here. But, you can be competitive with him as your quarterback.
Clearly, all the players like him. I mean, they were down and out at the beginning of last season. They ended up making the playoffs. And on top of which, they're pivoting off Tom Brady. A lot of the players there, their core star players like Mike Evans and all the others, played with Tom Brady. So that winning culture was already established. Yeah, I'm sure Baker wanted to stay. But at the same time, I think it's reciprocal. Like the organization went, yeah, let's just pay Baker. Like, what are we going to do? Get Kirk Cousins, draft another quarterback or nothing? I mean, they're fine with Baker.
You can be competitive with them, and you might win something. You could go to. You're not gonna.
They upset Philly in the first round. I mean, do you want to talk about excitement?
Yeah, you could.
With Baker Mayfield.
With a team around him, and that's what I'm saying. With a team around him, he could go deep.
On top of the core players that won the Super Bowl with Brady, that established culture, they like
anybody that can follow Tom Brady and not
crunch,
crap, whatever you want to say,
fall under pressure or whatever.
Anybody that can follow Tom Brady and keep it together and have players actually like him and say, like, some of them out there saying they like him more than Brady. You know what I mean? So that's a really hard thing to do. And I heard New England even wanted to talk to Baker. I don't know if they ever. I think he signed before the end of the thing, but New England was going to talk to Baker, and it's kind of like, oh wow, they found somebody that can actually come behind Tom Brady. Yeah. Wait, where did Mac Jones? Did he get traded or did he sign somewhere?
Traded to the Jaguars for like a second round draft pick. That's a decent sign. When you got Trevor Lawrence, who maybe he's not living up to expectations. I kind of think he is, but that's sort of the reputation going around. But his style of play is starting to bang him up a little bit. So you want that reliable option behind him. They give up like a second round pick, and that's about it. Yeah. On top of which, if you look at Mac Jones, his first year, they went, it was the first year without Brady, I'm pretty sure, and they went 10-7. I think he was like the backup all.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty good quarterback. He just got.
So first year, they went 10-7, made the playoffs. First year without Brady. He was an all-star his first season. I just don't think the reports on him where he doesn't totally respond to like a lot of pressure and a lot of criticism from his coaches, even though it's kind of weird because he came from Alabama and Nick Saban probably yelling at him every day. So I just think Belichick gave up on him like way too quickly that second year. On top of which, I think they got rid of their offensive coordinator, so we had to deal with a new guy. But he clearly has the skills because he was an all-star his first year. They made the playoffs.
He looked really weak there by the end, but I don't think Belichick. I think Belichick was pretty behind him. You know, I mean, he did bench him a couple of times, but for the most part, he kept him in there amidst a lot of criticism. But he was just falling apart. I mean, he was just making stupid throws, and his arm looked really soft. Like
his first season, they made the playoffs, and he was an all-star.
Yeah.
And from one season to the next, they got rid of that offensive coordinator, and it just didn't seem like he had it together ever since. And then he started getting benched, and he probably didn't respond well to that, and that's just what I'm talking about. But if you're the Jaguars and you're trying to get a good backup, it's a guy who's a former all-star and needs to revitalize his career. You only got to deal with him for a year. That's all it is.
Yeah, no, but I think once that happens to a lot of quarterbacks where they just get eaten up and spit out in their second year. But I think he did the best thing he could, like, because he's pretty much, he looked washed by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Like he was finished. Best thing you can do in that circumstance, like if I was going to rebuild my career, would be like, go play for Doug Peterson. Nice guy, quarterback coach, successful with quarterbacks, but at the same time, he's also like a player's coach and a nice guy. So just go play for him for a couple of years. Back up Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence will get injured a couple of times during the year.
Exactly.
He'll get to play. And I don't even think I don't think it's a 1 year thing for him. I think he's going to hang around there for a couple of years and then maybe go out. You know?
I think he's probably hoping Trevor Lawrence is out for 3 games. He overperforms and then gets signed somewhere the year after or something like that. But I think, given what he did his first year, is the same. It's starting to become a little apparent where in every single league, every bad player, every scrub in the league, given the right situation, can flourish. So that could just be the situation with him. We know he's good. We don't know if he was the right situation. We'll see what happens with the rest of his career. But anyway, time to wrap up the first episode, the first of many. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching. I'm hoping the edit came out well, given it's our first one. The LaCroix were flowing. I was speaking a little fast. I'll improve over time.
What are we doing? Free advertising for LaCroix?
The sparkling water was great. Let me cover it's impossible to cover this logo, but
We're not endorsing LaCroix.
we're not endorsing what I'm drinking out of.
We get
Stop saying their name. But no, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening, depending on where you're at. If you're interested in coming back and listening to more episodes and hearing our analysis, opinions, and everything else, you can subscribe to us on YouTube at Babershop Talk for the full-length podcast. If you don't have time to watch it, which I totally understand, you go to youtube.com/@Barbershop Talk Clips, where I clip up the most important parts in each section of the podcast, and I'll post it there. So we'll call it like 6-minute clips. If you want to follow us on Instagram and TikTok, I post edits, breaking news, memes, and clips from this podcast. You can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Barbershop Talk News. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Later.
Hasta luego.